Hey everybody, I'm Connor, this is Doug, and welcome to the one where we didn't have time to come up with a podcast pun because we were too busy playing Wordle. Yes, for the uninitiated, Wordle is a daily puzzle game where you have 6 chances to guess a randomly selected 5-letter word. If you have the right letter in the right spot, it shows up green. Correct letter in the wrong spot shows up yellow. And letters that aren't in the word at all show up gray, and it's super frustrating, and sometimes there's double letters, and that's really frustrating too, but I can't stop playing because it's so addictive and it makes me so mad.
Connor, rein it back in, bud. This is not that podcast. This is a safe space. This is the Bethel School District Presents, a podcast about the Bethel School District, and we're not talking about Wordle today. We're actually going to talk about math with our Chief Financial Officer, Brian Verley.
Okay, calm down a little bit, and we are talking about math. And Brian actually presented the unaudited 2021-2022 budget to the school board recently, and it had some sobering news in it.
You'll see an $11 million gap between revenues and expenditures. And again, the same pattern's holding. Revenues are increasing, but expenses have been increasing at a faster rate. This averages about 5% per year in revenue growth, about 8% per year in expense growth.
And what that means is the district's fund balance is decreasing every year and has been this past year by about $11 million.
So rounding to 11 million, but it's actually $10,735,150.42 was a decrease in fund balance. So you could say 10.7 if you want to.
In the 2018-19 school year, the fund balance was at $69 million. In 21-22, that had shrunk to $35 million, and that downward trend is still continuing. So let's back up a step and look at where the district's money comes from and where it's being spent.
So we'll start with where it comes from. If you think of a pie chart, 3/4 of it is money we get from the state. It's a vast majority of our budget. The other 25% is made up of federal money like ESSER funds, child nutrition money, and money for our title programs. And the rest is local levy dollars. And I want to take a moment and thank our voters for their support of our local levies.
Now, where does all that money go? We're a school district, so like we should be, we're spending our money educating students. The biggest chunk of that is in salaries.
Certificated employee services is 43%. If you want in dollar terms, that's about $138 million right there. Classified employee services, about 17%. That's about $53 million. Employee benefits, that's about $73 million. So these three combined are $265 million roughly out of the total of $320 million of expenditures.
And we all know things aren't getting cheaper. From salaries to supplies, we're seeing our spending going up.
Obviously, salaries and benefits have been the bigger increase over the last 5 years. They've increased $85 million, 47% over the past 5 years. When you really look at what our problem has been, why our expenditures are growing so fast, this is it. We've had salary schedule increases. All units have had it. Benefit increases. The state's implemented the SEB program for health insurance. Well, more employees are eligible because the cutoff rule is 630 hours. So that cost us more money. Washington paid family medical leave, never existed in the past. Now it's a new benefit expense of the district. When it was first initiated, it was 0.4%. Last year, it went to 0.6%. This January, it's going to go to 0.8%. That doesn't sound like a lot of money, but just do the math. Certificated salaries, $138 million, right? You do 0.4% of that, that's about $500,000. Do 0.8%, that's over $1 million. Well, that's an example of one rate that's gone up, but also the retirement plan contributions have generally gone up over the time period. They actually went down for the first time last year. They stayed the same this year, but all the projections are they're going to go back up again next year. And then we've had staffing increases like we've talked about.
And the problem with deficit spending is if nothing changes, eventually our fund balance will run out and we won't be able to pay the bills. Brian broke down where the problem is.
These three revenue sources are the major revenue sources of the district, and they are the only unrestricted revenue sources. Your local levy, your local effort assistance, and your general state apportionment. From 17-18 to 18-19, in total, they went up by 4.8%. While compensation went up by 11.9% the same year. Go the next year, those revenues up by 5.9% in total, compensation totals up by 9%. COVID year, actually we're down in revenue 0.7%, so just barely. Compensation up by 3.5. Revenue up by 2.5, compensation up by 4.1. We all know that's the problem and that's what has to be fixed. That's unfortunately where most of our cost is. Something I really want people to focus on. Our local effort assistance is going down just about every year and will continue to go down in projections. Our levy used to be at $45 million. It's only at 36 now because of the McCleary levy cap. So when people talk about the huge increase in state apportionment, you need to talk about the levy swap is really what happened there and the decrease in those revenues.
We hate to leave it on that down note, but that's where we are right now budget-wise. The state legislature is back in session, and there are hopes that they'll take a look at school funding, specifically the current regionalization model that's giving other districts, not us by the way, but other districts around us, 6, 12, and 18% more than Bethel's getting.
Well, while we're talking numbers, we might as well jump over to graduation rates.
When we look at graduation rates, we look at 4 cohorts of students. Those who graduate, sometimes we refer to it as on time, but in 4 years. Then we look at, well, can we bump that up? And those who graduate, they got 5 years to graduate, we do that for a 6-year and a 7-year. Okay, so, but those are different cohorts of kids, and that's important as we look at these charts.
That's Brian Loffer. He's our Director of Assessment and Highly Capable, and he presented our 2022 graduation rates to the school board. Now, we're not going to read all the charts to you here, but you can find them on our data dashboard under About Our District on bethelsd.org.
And the state scores aren't published yet. We typically don't see them till late February or March, but we did want to share our scores.
1 year ago, I stood here and said we had a big drop in our graduation rate. The question we all wondered was this the start of a trend, or was this an anomaly, or somewhere in between? So now we have our first year after that drop, and we're at 86.4%. If you look at that in context of other years, that's close to where we've been. That's 1.8 points below our highest that we've had was 2017. In fact, you can see from 2017, we kind of had mostly a flat line, but with that drop that we had last year. So that's where we're at. And just, it's always good to look at where we started back in 2013, which was about 17 points lower than we are now. So we have grown, but it's been flat since 2017. So that's something to be looking at.
So that's our 4-year rate. Our 5-year rate is down a little bit, and our 6 and 7-year rates remain above 90%, where they've been for quite some time.
And one thing people wonder about is what happens to the kids that didn't graduate. We do our best to keep them on track and try to engage them through a variety of programs in the district, including the Bethel Acceleration Academy, and those graduation ceremonies are pretty inspiring to watch.
Now, Brian Loffer loves data, so he also dug into our graduation rates by subgroups. We're not going to go through all of them, and again, you can find them on our website, but here's a few that he noted.
American Indian, Alaskan Native, much lower percentage of students graduating, so that's a concern. Now, I do want to have caution that that's a very small number of kids that represent that bar, but every kid counts in that. So that's something that we need to be watching, that group, because that is a big gap. The other subgroup in this last year was white students were actually lower than the district average. All other subgroups were either at or above the district average for federal race. Gender brought another kind of big aha gap. If you look at this tall bar here, that's females. Right next to that is males. So females are graduating, at least in 2022 in the 4-year, at a much higher rate than males did.
So head over to bethelsd.org where you can find the data and even break it down school by school. And when the state data is available, we'll get that updated too.
Brian also updated the school board on our Highly Capable program. We have a lot of programs that fall under this umbrella. Our Challenge and Endeavor programs at the elementary level, and Honors Humanities and Honors Math at middle school.
And in high school, there's the Cambridge program, AP classes, and Running Start classes. And the question we get frequently is, how are kids selected to get started in the Highly Capable programs?
Historically, we've always used referrals. Referrals come from parents, teachers, and other community members and other students even as one group to give a test and place into programs. But we can't just rely upon that. And that's some of the equity efforts that we implemented many years ago. So we had universal screening at 2nd grade where we tested every student and then added students that were not referred, but did show advanced marks on that 2nd grade screener. So that made the pool of people that we then looked at each year bigger. The other thing we started doing was district office referrals. And really that's just fancy word for saying, I'm looking at data in our state tests and our district benchmark tests to see, are we missing kids that are high in either ELA, reading, or in mathematics areas that we're not pulling in and being referred, and we add more to those. And that can be up to another 300 or so kids that I refer from my office based on looking at data each year.
Now, Brian said there's not just one test kids are given. In fact, there's multiple tests and measures his team looks at. They test cognitive ability and also include state tests, benchmark tests like star reading and math, and more.
But the tests aren't the only way we're making sure that all the kids have an equitable opportunity to qualify for these programs.
We stopped doing Saturday testing. Everybody who has referred, everybody gets tested. There's no, you have to make it separately, and it's done during your school day.
And Brian said we're also recruiting students with help from our multilingual education teachers.
So to wrap up the show today, we wanted to take a little step outside the district news and chat about Sprinker Recreation Center.
Indeed, there's a lot of upgrades coming to Sprinker, and Benjamin Barrett, the design and construction supervisor for Pierce County Parks, talked about that at a recent school board meeting.
The 2 existing natural turf softball fields are going to be converted to synthetic turf fields with a soccer and lacrosse overlay in them. We're also going to install our first futsal court with full sideboards and lights. So that's a small hard court soccer game called futsal. So we're excited about that. We're going to renovate the basketball courts. We're going to remodel the restroom and concession building so it comes up to code and make it fully ADA accessible. And then the big things that we're going to do in this project is build a regional size spray park fully open to the public. And then we're also going to put in a new regional size playground just below that. And then we're going to install a new community event lawn. So that'll be a lawn that will be available for passive use and community events and other types of recreation.
They'll also be doing parking lot improvements and other things, including the new Parkland Community Trail that'll eventually connect Sprinker to Pacific Lutheran University.
And along with the outside changes, they're also looking at changes to the Sprinker building itself and the programs that they'll be offering in the future. Be sure to go to their website to make your voice heard as they make decisions on what programs they'll be offering in the future.
Wowzers, we really took a lap around the district today, didn't we, Doug?
We sure did, and lots of math.
Because we know everybody loves math.
Well, speaking of math, I saw a math teacher with some graph paper the other day. I think he was plotting something.
Oh, brother. Back to kid-friendly jokes, are we?
Naturally, the people have spoken. This is what they want.
Okay, then. Here's one for you. What did the triangle say to the circle?
I don't know.
You're pointless.
And on that note, we're out of here.
Have a great weekend, everybody. See you next week.